The glass doors of the Grand Orion Hotel reflected Daniel Cole's image back at him. Creased shirt, faded trousers, shoes dulled by dust and long roads. He stood still for a moment, not because he lacked confidence, but because standing still had always helped him observe. Inside, polished marble floors shone under warm lights, and the scent of fresh flowers drifted faintly each time the doors slid open for other guests. A uniformed hotel staff member noticed him almost immediately. The man's eyes traveled downward first, lingering on Daniel's shoes longer than necessary, then back up with a tightening jaw. That single look carried a conclusion already reached. "Sir," the staff member said, stepping forward and raising a hand. "This hotel is for registered guests." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm here for a short visit." Behind the glass, a receptionist paused her typing to watch. Another staff member leaned closer, whispering something Daniel could not hear, but the meaning was clear from the way they glanced at his clothes and then away. A well-dressed couple exited the hotel, laughing. The doors opened wide for them, then closed halfway again, leaving Daniel outside, separated by a thin sheet of glass and a thick wall of judgment. "I'll need you to leave," the staff member said, his tone sharper now. "You're making guests uncomfortable." Daniel's grip tightened around the worn leather bag in his hand. It was the same bag he had carried across 3 countries, the same bag that held documents he had signed decades earlier, documents that had built this very hotel brick by brick. No one here knew that, and that, he reminded himself, was the point. A flash of memory surfaced uninvited. Daniel, much younger, standing beside his father outside a government office. His father had worn simple clothes that day, too. A guard had blocked their path, laughing softly. Later that night, his father had said, "One day, they will open the doors wide for you. Make sure you remember how it felt when they didn't." The memory faded as another hotel staff member stepped forward. A woman this time, posture rigid, expression fixed. "You need to go now," she said, pointing toward the street. "This is not a place for people like you." The words landed cleanly. No shouting, no insult raised in volume. Just certainty. Guests inside slowed their steps. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to notice. A security camera above the entrance blinked, recording everything silently. Daniel took one step back. The staff member placed a firm hand on his chest, guiding him down the marble steps as though escorting an inconvenience away. Daniel did not resist. He allowed himself to be moved, his face calm, almost thoughtful. As his shoes touched the pavement below, the doors slid shut behind him. Inside, the hotel returned to its rhythm. Outside, Daniel stood alone, the city noise rushing back in. He looked up at the building once more, not with anger, but with quiet resolve. His fingers brushed the edge of the photograph tucked inside his pocket, a photograph taken before the hotel had a name. Across the street, a black sedan idled, unnoticed. Daniel adjusted his grip on the bag and stepped forward, leaving behind a moment that would soon return with consequences no one at the entrance could imagine. The black sedan eased away from the curb as Daniel crossed the street, its tinted windows shielding the eyes watching him. Inside the car, Mark Cole leaned forward slightly, his attention fixed on his father's steady walk. Daniel never looked back. He never needed to. Mark's phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. "He's been turned away," Mark said quietly. "Just like you expected." On the other end, a board member exhaled. "Are you sure they didn't recognize him?" Mark glanced through the rear window as Daniel disappeared into the flow of pedestrians. "If they did," he replied, "they hit it well." The call ended. The car slowed, keeping Daniel in sight. Daniel walked 2 blocks before stopping at a small roadside cafe. He sat at an outdoor table, placed his bag carefully at his feet, and ordered tea. His movements were unhurried, deliberate. To anyone watching, he looked like a man with nowhere urgent to be. But beneath that calm, memories stirred. Years earlier, Daniel had stood in an unfinished building with blueprints rolled under his arm. Back then, there were no chandeliers, no marble floors, just raw concrete and ambition. He had shaken hands with investors who smiled politely while doubting him. He had learned early that people trusted polish more than purpose. That lesson had shaped everything. When the first hotel opened, Daniel insisted on one rule above all others. Every guest is a guest before they are a wallet. It was printed in the staff handbook, framed in employee halls, repeated during training sessions. Over time, as the chain expanded and Daniel stepped back from daily operations, that rule became a slogan instead of practice. Daniel sipped his tea and watched people pass. Across the street, Mark watched too, his jaw tight. He remembered growing up in hotel corridors, staff greeting his father warmly, unaware they were speaking to the owner. Daniel had always preferred it that way. Truth shows itself when power is hidden, he used to say. Mark's phone buzzed again. A message this time. Board members have arrived early. Harris is unaware. Mark typed a single reply. Good. Back at the hotel, Mr. Harris stood in his office reviewing occupancy reports. He prided himself on maintaining standards. Image mattered. Reputation mattered. He believed he had protected both that morning. Downstairs, the receptionist replayed the moment in her mind. The man's calm eyes, the way he hadn't argued. Something about it unsettled her. But she pushed the feeling aside when the lobby doors opened and a group of sharply dressed individuals walked in. Board members, someone whispered. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Meanwhile, Daniel finished his tea, paid in cash, and rose. He checked his watch. Time mattered now. He reached into his bag and removed a slim folder. Inside were documents stamped and signed long ago, names that still carried weight, including his own. He closed the folder without opening it. This was not about proof. It was about truth. Daniel stepped back onto the street and headed toward the hotel once more, unaware that inside, decisions were already unraveling. And above the entrance, the security camera continued to blink, quietly preserving the moment that would soon define everyone involved. Inside the Grand Orion Hotel, tension crept in unnoticed, like a draft slipping through a crack no one remembered leaving open. The board members moved through the lobby with measured steps, their presence changing the air without a single word needing explanation. Conversations softened, smiles tightened, staff straightened instinctively. Mr. Harris emerged from his office mid-stride, confusion flickering across his face before he replaced it with a practiced smile. I wasn't informed of an early visit, he said, extending his hand. Mark Cole shook it politely, his grip firm but brief. That was intentional. Mr. Harris laughed lightly, uncertain. Of course. We're always prepared. Mark did not respond. His eyes drifted past the front desk toward a monitor mounted discreetly on the wall. The live security feed looped quietly. He stepped closer. Could you rewind today's entrance footage? Mark asked. The receptionist hesitated. Sir, please. Her fingers moved quickly. The footage rewound. Morning light. Guests arriving. Then Daniel Cole appeared on screen. The lobby fell silent. On the monitor, Daniel stood before the glass doors, worn clothes clear even through grainy footage. Staff approached. Words exchanged. A hand lifted. A firm pushback. Mark watched without blinking. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. Sir, that man, Mark said calmly, is my father. The words landed heavier than shouting ever could. Mr. Harris froze. The receptionist's hand flew to her mouth. The doorman from earlier felt his knees weaken as recognition dawned too late. Mark turned slowly, facing the assembled staff. Daniel Cole founded this hotel, this chain. Everything you are standing on exists because he believed hospitality meant dignity. No one spoke. As if summoned by the weight of truth itself, the glass doors slid open again. Daniel walked in. He wore the same clothes, carried the same warm bag. But now, every step echoed louder than before. Staff instinctively parted, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Daniel stopped in the center of the lobby and looked around, his eyes resting briefly on the marble floors, the chandeliers, the people. He saw fear now, regret, recognition. I wondered, Daniel said softly, what would happen if I arrived today as a stranger? Mr. Harris stepped forward, his voice trembling. Sir, I had no idea. If I had known. Daniel raised a hand gently. That is exactly the point. Silence stretched. I did not come to be recognized, Daniel continued. I came to see who you respect, when you believe no one important is watching. The receptionist's eyes filled with tears. The doorman stared at the floor, shame burning his face. Daniel turned slightly, glancing at the security camera above the entrance. That moment, he said, will be used for training, not punishment. Truth. Mark stepped beside him. The board will review all staff conduct policies immediately. Daniel nodded once, then looked back at Mr. Harris. You believed you protected the hotel today, he said. Tell me, who did you actually protect? Mr. Harris could not answer. Daniel adjusted the strap of his bag. I will return later, he said calmly. For now, sit with what you saw. He turned and walked out again, leaving behind a lobby full of people who suddenly understood that the biggest mistakes are often made when no one thinks they matter. The lobby did not return to normal after Daniel Cole left. It could not. The chandeliers still glowed, the marbles still shined, but something unseen had cracked beneath the surface. Staff moved slowly now, as though each step required permission. Mr. Harris sat in his office with the door closed, his hands clasped tightly on the desk. The confidence that had once shaped his posture was gone. On the screen before him, the pause security footage showed a single frame. Daniel's body angled slightly away, a staff member's arm raised to block him. Mr. Harris stared at it, as if the image might rearrange itself if he looked long enough. It did not. Across the hall, the doorman sat alone in the staff room. He had replayed the moment again and again in his head, searching for a version where he had chosen differently. There was none. He remembered the certainty he had felt, the way judgment had come so easily. That was what frightened him now. The receptionist stood by the front desk, hands folded, eyes unfocused. She remembered Daniel's calm voice, the lack of anger. That calm unsettled her more than shouting ever could have. It meant he had already known how the moment would end. Elsewhere in the building, Mark met privately with the board. Papers were spread across the table, policies highlighted, complaint logs reopened. Patterns emerged that no one could ignore anymore. Guests dismissed subtly, one board member said. Applicants judged before interviews. Mark nodded. My father warned us this would happen if standards replaced values. A silence followed, heavy with understanding. Meanwhile, Daniel walked through the city alone. He passed storefronts, street vendors, people who never looked twice at his clothes. Here, he blended in. Here, no one bowed or apologized. As he walked, memories returned unbidden. The first hotel he had built had no marble floors. Guests slept on simple beds, ate meals cooked by hand, but they were welcomed with warmth. Daniel had greeted them personally sometimes, unnoticed, listening more than speaking. That was where he had learned the truth he still lived by. People reveal themselves most honestly when they think no reward or consequence follows. Daniel stopped at a small park and sat on a bench. He removed the photograph from his pocket again. In it, he was younger, smiling beside men who had doubted him. He had proven them wrong then. Today was different. Today was not about proving. It was about reminding. Back at the hotel, an announcement echoed quietly through staff channels. Mandatory retraining. Immediate reviews. Temporary closures. Fear spread quickly. But beneath the fear was something else, awareness. When Daniel finally rose from the bench, his phone buzzed. A single message from Mark appeared. They understand now. Daniel looked up at the sky briefly before replying. Understanding is only the beginning. He turned back toward the hotel, knowing the next step would hurt more than the first, but would also mean something lasting. Daniel returned to the Grand Orion Hotel in the late afternoon, when the sun angled low enough to turn the glass facade into a mirror of fire and gold. This time, the doors opened before he reached them, not because someone recognized him, but because everyone was watching. Staff lined the lobby without instruction. Their shoulders were stiff, hands folded, eyes lowered. The doorman stood among them, his earlier confidence replaced by quiet dread. The receptionist swallowed hard when she saw Daniel step inside again, carrying the same worn bag. Daniel did not pause to let the moment breathe. He walked straight through the center of the lobby and into the conference room, where the board and senior management were already waiting. He took a seat at the head of the table, placing the bag at his feet. I will not raise my voice, Daniel said evenly. I will not humiliate anyone the way I was humiliated today. That would teach nothing. Mr. Harris nodded repeatedly, sweat forming at his temples. Sir, I take full responsibility. Daniel looked at him carefully. You took responsibility the moment you decided what kind of people belonged here. That sentence landed heavier than a threat. Daniel opened his bag and removed the slim folder. He slid it across the table. Inside were old mission statements, handwritten notes, early staff guidelines. Some pages were yellowed with age. These were not marketing tools, Daniel said. They were promises. Mark leaned forward. We reviewed complaint records. Patterns go back years. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was no rage in them. Only disappointment sharpened by clarity. The hotel will close for 14 days, Daniel said. Every staff member will undergo retraining. Not on protocol, on people. A murmur rippled through the room. Management will be restructured, Daniel continued. Some roles will end today. Others will change. Mr. Harris stiffened. Sir, you were hired to protect dignity, Daniel said calmly. You protected image instead. Silence followed. Outside the conference room, staff waited, sensing the shift even before announcements were made. When word reached them, some cried. Some bowed their heads. Some felt relief they could not explain. Daniel stepped back into the lobby once more. His eyes met the doorman's. The man opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Daniel nodded slightly. Remember this feeling, he said. If you do, you will never repeat today. The doorman's eyes filled with tears. Daniel turned toward the exit, pausing briefly as he looked back at the grand space he had once imagined filled only with welcome. This was never a test of wealth, he said softly. It was a test of character. Then he walked out. The doors closed behind him again, but this time no one believed the moment was over. 2 weeks later, the Grand Orion Hotel reopened. The chandeliers sparkled, the marble gleamed, and the lobby smelled of fresh flowers, just as it had before. Yet everything had changed. The air was lighter, quieter, but charged with awareness. Every staff member moved with intent, carrying lessons learned rather than routine habits. New staff manuals lined the front desk, emphasizing respect, dignity, and the idea that appearances do not define worth. Existing staff walked among the new recruits, some silently recalling the day Daniel Cole had been forced away, the day judgment had met reality. In the reception area, a young doorman polished the brass handles, pausing occasionally to look toward the entrance. He remembered the morning when he had blocked a man in worn clothes. The memory no longer carried embarrassment, it carried understanding. Across the lobby, the receptionist stood straight, greeting guests with a calm professionalism that had once been lacking. She caught herself smiling when a modestly dressed guest approached, remembering Daniel's words. Judgment is easy. Character is harder. Mark Cole watched from the boardroom window, arms crossed, a faint smile on his lips. He had overseen retraining, policy revisions, and a complete restructuring of management. He knew the story of today's reopening would spread quietly, shaping the behavior of all who worked there. Meanwhile, Daniel Cole walked the city streets once more. He carried no bag this time. His steps were light but deliberate. He had no need to return to the hotel to assert authority. The lesson had been planted, deep and enduring. Yet sometimes he thought of the doors, the marble steps, and the staff who had learned a truth that day in the only way it could be learned. He stopped briefly at a cafe, observing a poorly dressed man approach the entrance of a different building, hesitant, unsure. Daniel's eyes softened. In that moment, he remembered the look of the doorman's hand, the receptionist's frozen gaze, the quiet power of humility and patience. A single nod would have sufficed. Back at the Grand Orion, the lobby hummed with life. Guests of all appearances moved freely, greeted warmly. Staff anticipated needs, read expressions, and treated every visitor with the same care, the same dignity Daniel had once demanded but now ensured through policy, example, and memory. In quiet moments, staff would recall the man in faded clothes, the founder of their entire chain, turn away at the entrance. They would recall the calmness in his eyes, the weight of his silence, and the knowledge that judgment had been a mistake. The day faded into evening, sunlight painting the marble in warm hues. The lobby doors glimmered as they reflected the city outside. For everyone inside, the lesson had settled like an unshakable truth. Appearances deceive, patience teaches, and the biggest mistakes are often made when people assume they see the whole story. And somewhere in the city, Daniel walked on, a quiet witness to the change he had wrought, knowing that the hotel, and those who served it, would carry his lesson far beyond a single morning, far beyond the walls of marble and glass. The hotel staff had learned. The guests were none the wiser. But Daniel's legacy, the understanding that respect and character outweigh appearances, was now indelibly etched into the heart of the Grand Orion Hotel. Judgment had failed. Wisdom had won. The end.